Welcome to Photoshop 2.3 Part 2, Gradient Fill Layers and Gradient Map Adjustments. We're going to start with, we finished up doing a selection layer mask where I selected the birds and I put them on a yellow background. But now I want to do something a little more unique. So I can either go down to the bottom of my layers palette and click on Create New Fill or Adjustment Layer, or I can go to Layer, New Fill Layer, Gradient. In this case, I'm going to be on this layer and I'm going to click Gradient. Okay, now you see what happens here. It's going to go with black, but I don't have to stick with this gradient. I can go and choose any gradient I like. Now I know it's covering it up, but don't worry. Okay, so I'm gonna, and if I don't like these gradients, I can always click right here on this little arrow and I can go and load some gradients. I can create a new gradient. I can delete gradients, all that kind of stuff. Save the gradients I've created, replace gradients, or I can add to it and say, you know what, I want some special effects gradients. And then it's going to say, do you want to replace these, or say okay, and if not, cancel, or append. I can add them to it. So I'm going to append. Alright, so I'm going to choose this gradient here. But now notice this too. I can also choose a linear, radial, angle, and then I can change that angle here however I want. I can choose reflected, or I can choose a diamond pattern, and I'm going to keep that diamond pattern there. I can reverse it just like that, and I'm going to leave the reverse too, and I click OK. Okay, now how do I get it so that I can see this? Well, I need to turn this into a clipping mask with this layer. So I'm going to press my Alt key and go between the two till a double circle comes up, and I'm going to click, and now look what happens. That blue and white gradient is going to come through on the birds there. And if I wanted it to be the opposite, instead I could have that layer down here on the bottom and do it that way so that the whole background was that. And if I want to do that, I could hide this. I could ungroup this. Okay, so I'm going to hold Alt and ungroup it, and then I'm going to hide this, and I'm going to grab this and drag it underneath that one, and now take a look what happened. That gradient layer is on the background, the birds are still there, and then if I want to change anything, I just double click it and open it up and say, you know what, I decided I wanted a radial, or I wanted a linear, or whatever it was that I wanted. And you can also, you know, again, reverse. You can scale it down so that it's more or less that other color in the gradient, however you want to work it, and it makes for a really cool, really cool backgrounds, really cool, interesting things. Okay, now what about map adjustment? Okay, just for ease sake, I'm gonna delete this gradient that I just created and go back to how it was in the beginning, and I'm going to get on this bird layer. Now, gradient mapping is an interesting option for you, because the gradient map adjustment command, it maps the colors of a specified gradient fill to the equivalent shadows, midtones, and highlights in an image. So for example, if you mapped a 3-color gradient fill to an image, one endpoint of the gradient would map to the shadows, the center color stop would map to the midtones, and the other endpoint would map to the highlights in the image. The result is not a gradient unless you have manually applied one in the image, but it's rather an adjustment layer that replaces image colors. So let's check that out. Let's go and create by clicking on that and go to Gradient Map here next to the bottom, and automatically it jumps to black and white, but obviously I'm going to drop that down and I'm going to say, okay, well, what happens if I click, oh wow, that's totally different, because it's mapping everything to that looks really cool, to the midtones and the shadows and the highlights of the photo. And then I can choose whatever I want, and again the same applies. I can click the little arrow here and I can say, you know what, I want some special effects, and I want them to add to, so I'm going to hit append, and I want to see what happens when I do the special effect. So that's really neat. Oh, I love that, because I love blue. Let's check out the green. Oh, that's pretty. And I like that too, but I really like that blue. That's really cool. So I'm going to stick with that. And then I can reverse it so that it looks like that, or I can keep it like this, one way or the other. And then I can reset my gradient map, or I can even open up any of these options here and say, you know what, I want to mess with the vibrance of the color, and it's going to give me a new layer. And then I can go here, and the vibrance, the adjustment layer options for vibrance opens, and I can drag it up and see what happens. And if I go all the way up or all the way down, what happens. And my saturation, dropping it down, popping it up. Oh, that makes the blue pop even more. And so I can say, well, you know what, I like that the best, and I'm going to leave it there. And that is a gradient map for you, and have a ton of options there, so you could just play around with things and make things turn out really cool looking. That's gradient fill layers and gradient map adjustments.